Today's June 6th, D-Day, and I'd like to talk a little bit about the heroism of D-Day and some of the mistakes that were made at Omaha Beach that Americans overcame. Eileen and I had an experience that was very poignant. We were visiting Pointe du Hoc in the 1980s, and that's the cliff that the Rangers scaled in order to disable the guns at top that would have really posed a threat to our naval fleet. And it looked like an impossible task, but they did it. They succeeded. They captured the guns, and there's a obelisk on top of there of the names of those who died doing that. So Eileen and I were walking up toward the obelisk, and an old guy, certainly of World War II vintage, this was back in the 80s, came over to us and said in a thick accent that I thought was German, "Are you American?" And I wouldn't say, "Are you German?" I said, "Are you French?" We said, "Yes, are you French?" And he said, "No, Dutch." And then he stuck out his hand, and with tears running down his cheeks, sobbing, he said, "Thank you." Incredible. I've never felt more unworthy of receiving a thanks. But I want to talk a little bit about Omaha Beach, because there's new information that's come out from the biography of Eisenhower by Gene Edward Smith that is really worth considering about what caused the vastly disproportionate casualties at Omaha Beach. And the blame rests on General Omar Bradley, the commander of Omaha Beach. And the credit goes to the American forces that were brave enough and inventive enough to overcome the bad hand that they were dealt. Start with the intelligence. The military thought that these would be reservists and old men and Hitler Youth defending these fortifications. But it turned out it was the 352nd Division, one of the best German divisions in the army, just moved in from the Russian front. Secondly, the British soldiers were carrying 15 to 20 pounds of equipment. The American soldiers had 68 pounds, which meant that a lot of them drowned and floundered in the surf. Bradley ordered a 40-minute bombardment with some of the smaller guns in the fleet. In the other beaches, there was a 4-hour bombardment by the heaviest guns. So there was not a lot done to neutralize the defenses that the Germans had erected. In addition, the other forces, particularly the British, made heavy use of tanks, which landed on the beaches and would go ahead and demolish fortifications and barbed wire and clear minefields in advance of the troops. Bradley opted not to use tanks extensively, instead used DD tanks, a very light tank that floundered in the surf, and none made it ashore. The main thing was, though, that Bradley chose to release his troops 12 miles out as opposed to 7 miles out. And the result is that there was an increased risk of GIs getting sick, of floundering, and the result was when they got to the beach, they were groggy and weak and sick. He also elected to do a frontal assault on the German positions as opposed to a flank attack. And U.S. military doctrine called for a frontal attack, even though we learned in Sardinia and Sicily and Italy and North Africa not to do a frontal attack, but to come in over the flanks. Anyway, the result of all of this was that the Omaha Beach became a slaughterhouse. And it was very, very hard for the Americans to get any traction at all. Eventually what happened was that the American forces, because of their inventiveness and courage, were able to overcome that and move ahead aggressively and go inland anyway. And in little groups, they began to break through and ultimately overcame the German defenses. Let's realize the tremendous debt of gratitude we have to those young men. Thanks.